30 grand. Today, that kind of cash gets you a decent mid-sized crossover off the dealership lot. But what if I told you that this exact amount was all it took to paralyze a strategic industry of a superpower boasting the world's largest nuclear arsenal? While the globe's top militaries are blowing billions on stealth fighters, we are witnessing the most spectacular economic humiliation in the history of modern warfare. How did off-the-shelf, dirt-cheap drones manage to set billion-dollar refineries ablaze, leaving Russia's highly touted air defense network looking completely blind? And how did Kyiv, starting this year by launching a modest 3,000 drones a month, end up shattering its own records, attacking with 3 times as many drones this month compared to January? We're watching Zelensky pivot from a desperate petitioner into a ruthless player who coldly brushes off Washington's warnings and delivers point-blank military ultimatums to Lukashenko. In today's episode, we are dissecting the anatomy of a merciless, asymmetric war. We'll show you exactly how Kyiv dismantled the very concept of a safe rear and weaponized geography against its enemy. Grab a coffee, sit back, and let's dive in. Remember what this looked like just a minute ago? The endless European tours, the grim faces of Western officials, the exhausting backroom diplomacy. Give us long-range missiles, but we swear we won't strike Russian soil. Give us F-16s, and we promise to avoid escalation. Throughout 2022 and 2023, Kyiv had to clear every single move with its Western backers. They were forced to fight a strictly defensive war, absolutely terrified of crossing the infamous red lines. After all, the entire strategy out of Brussels and Washington was built on clinical escalation management. Give Ukraine just enough to survive, but God forbid you provoke a massive retaliation from Moscow. Kyiv had to play by their rules, kept on a notoriously short leash by the looming threat of an arms embargo. But the paradigm has completely flipped. And nothing highlights this quite like the glow of burning Russian oil refineries. Ukraine isn't just adapting, they are actively rewriting global military doctrine in real time. Their drone strikes are pulling off absolute miracles, and that success is exactly what injected Zelensky with this new, bulletproof confidence. The wildest precedent, the one that completely tore up the old playbook, happened right in front of our eyes just days ago. Out of nowhere, Zelensky drops a direct, unprecedented ultimatum on Alexander Lukashenko, and the text of it hits like a slap in the face. Either you dismantle your drone relay stations on the border within a week, or we wipe them out ourselves, right on your territory. Grasp the sheer scale of this shift. Only yesterday, Ukraine was sweating over the nightmare scenario of the Belarusian army officially entering the chat, doing everything humanly possible not to poke the northern bear. Today, Zelensky rests his finger on the escalation button, looks Minsk dead in the eye, and says, "Go ahead, try me." And the craziest part? It worked. The relay towers abruptly went dark. Minsk silently backed down. Why? Because Lukashenko is a politician with a borderline feral survival instinct. He's a shrewd operator who always knows which way the wind is blowing. He can point at maps and rant about where the attack on Belarus was coming from all day long. But he understands the language of raw, brute force far better than diplomatic French. The Belarusian leader looked at Kyiv's ice-cold confidence, looked at the blazing Russian refineries, and realized one simple truth. These guys are done bluffing. They will actually pull the trigger. So he wisely slammed on the brakes. Instead of spending years begging the West for wildly expensive fighter jets, or trying to outmuscle the massive Russian army in a classic head-on meat grinder, Ukraine opted for a radically different strategy. Kyiv simply took the concept of a safe, deep rear and deleted it. It sounds completely counterintuitive, but Russia's colossal landmass, the legendary impenetrable shield that broke both Napoleon and Hitler, has mutated into its fatal vulnerability. When your enemy suddenly wields thousands of cheap, long-range kamikaze drones, physics dictate that you simply cannot put an air defense umbrella over every single oil depot and factory scattered across 11 time zones. According to OSINT analysts and Western defense think tanks like the ISW and IISS, up to 400 strategic Russian assets now sit squarely inside the drone kill zone. We're talking critical infrastructure within a 1,000 to 1,500 kilometer radius of the border, which is currently getting pounded on a regular basis. To guarantee airtight 24/7 protection for just one of these sites, say the Ryazan oil refinery, you need to deploy at least 2 or 3 short-range systems like the Pantsir or Tor. They need overlapping fields of fire to cover blind spots and reload. Doing some back-of-the-napkin math, Russia would need roughly 600 of these short-range SHORAD systems just to lock down its deep rear. Do you think the Russian MOD has an armada like that sitting in a warehouse? Spoiler alert, they couldn't scrape together that kind of hardware in their wildest, most vodka-fueled dreams. Looking at the most optimistic intelligence estimates, Russia currently operates roughly 150 Pantsirs and 130 Tors, meaning fewer than 300 vehicles in total. That is exactly half the bare minimum required to secure the homeland. But here's the kicker. Those systems aren't even guarding the refineries. About 70 to 80% of that fleet is permanently chained to the zero line. Out there, they operate as VIP bodyguards, desperately trying to shield the vaunted S-400 batteries from incoming HIMARS strikes. And in recent months, this deficit has become agonizingly obvious. It's the classic short blanket dilemma in the dead of winter. Pull it up to cover your head at the front, and your oil refineries immediately freeze in the deep rear. According to the Institute for the Study of War, Russian command is already panicking, stripping air defenses from frontline sectors and literally dragging Pantsirs back to fortify Moscow. As the war grinds on, this shortage is going to become catastrophic. Why am I so sure? Just look at the raw data from Western intelligence. British Defense Intelligence Agency Janes and the Wall Street Journal highlight a frankly insane statistic. Back in May of last year, Russia was tracking around 2,500 incoming drones a month. Fast forward to May 2026, and that metric smashed through the ceiling, hitting nearly 9,000 UAVs. Let that scale sink in. The Ukrainian military-industrial complex right now looks like the quiet kid at a house party who just hijacked the DJ booth, cranked the bass to the absolute max, and is fully vibing. They are setting historic milestones. The Russian Ministry of Defense itself officially whined that on the night of June 26th alone, they intercepted and destroyed 660 Ukrainian drones, dubbing it the most massive swarm attack of the entire war. Think about that. 660 units in a single night. And those are just the ones they claim to have shot down. But the real nightmare for the Kremlin isn't the volume, it's the lethality. Janes's intel shows that Ukrainian strikes are getting terrifyingly precise. Roughly 35% of all successful air defense penetrations and infrastructure hits this year occurred precisely in June. Quantity has finally evolved into devastating quality. Let's break down the physical mechanics of this damage using the most glaring example, those battered Russian oil refineries. A lot of viewers, raised on Hollywood blockbusters, assume a drone strike means the whole facility detonates in a Michael Bay fireball and gets wiped off the map. Not even close. A refinery is a sprawling, hardened maze of concrete bunkers and ultra-thick pipelines, heavily engineered back in the Soviet era with the literal intention of surviving a nuclear blast. Hitting a behemoth like that with 50 kilos of drone payload is like a mosquito bite. But here's the trick. Ukrainian operators aren't aiming for the concrete. They are operating like neurosurgeons. They pilot these drones into one hyper-specific critically vulnerable node, the primary crude oil distillation unit, the infamous AVT. Simply put, this is the beating heart of the refinery. This towering column is where raw crude is actually separated into gasoline, kerosene, and fuel oil. Take out this heart, and the entire colossal concrete organism immediately flatlines. The refinery devolves into a massive, useless pipe warehouse. And fixing it? It's a nightmare. A distillation column isn't your kitchen sink. You can't just patch it with duct tape, whack it with a wrench, and call it a day. Normally, overhauling this unit takes 6 to 12 months. But in the reality of heavily sanctioned Russia, you can safely double that timeline. See, during the cash flush 2000s and 2010s, the Russian oil sector went through a massive modernization spree. And who provided the gear? You guessed it, top-tier Western engineering. The high-capacity pumps, complex compressors, advanced automation, and specialty valves are all Siemens, Honeywell, and other elite American or European brands. Pre-war, it was simple. A valve breaks, the plant calls the manufacturer in Germany, and a pristine replacement arrives in 2 weeks. How does it work now? Legally, no one will sell them so much as a bolt. Welcome to logistical hell. To replace a drone-scorched unit, Russian oil execs have to hunt down parts through a shady maze of shell companies and smuggle them in via gray imports across 3 different borders. A piece of hardware that used to cost $1 million now drains $3 million, and instead of 2 weeks, it takes 6 months to arrive. And if out of sheer desperation they try to swap in Chinese knockoffs, they physically and digitally refuse to handshake with the existing Western software. To really grasp why hitting Russian refineries isn't just a PR stunt, but a cold, mathematically weaponized strategy, let's look at the bottom line. Take 5 major oil refineries knocked offline by drones in recent months. Halting each of those plants for 3 to 6 months translates into a colossal, bleeding loss of revenue for the Russian state budget. And now for the punchline. How much do you think it costs Ukraine to orchestrate this localized industrial apocalypse? A Ukrainian long-range strike drone runs about $30,000 a pop. You might rightfully point out, drones never fly solo, it's always a swarm, and air defense swats down the vast majority. Fair enough. Let's do the honest math. Suppose Kyiv launches a 20-drone swarm. Total invoice? Around $600,000. Russian pantsires burn through hyper-expensive interceptor missiles and shoot down 19 of them. On paper, that's a flawless victory for air defense. But a single drone slips through the net and dives straight into the heart of the refinery. The final tally: Ukraine spent $600. Russia successfully defended itself, but still gets slapped with a multi-million-dollar repair bill and hemorrhages hundreds of millions in net revenue due to the plant's downtime. I'm no math genius, but even factoring in the intercepted drones, that kind of ROI is the wet dream of any military strategist. The cost-to-damage ratio is absolutely astronomical. Ultimately, looking at these numbers and the smoking ruins of factories, you can't definitively say Ukraine is winning the war right now. The situation on the zero line remains brutally tough, and this grinding war of attrition is incinerating massive resources. But you certainly can't say Russia is winning it either. The true triumph of this drone campaign lies elsewhere. Ukraine managed to pull off something that seemed literally unthinkable just a couple of years ago. It dragged the war off its own soil and slammed it right into the enemy's backyard. The illusion of a safe, untouchable deep rear has totally collapsed. For the residents of Russian regions, the war is no longer just a slick B-roll package on the evening news. It has physically crashed into their oil depots, air bases, and factories. This is a tectonic, psychological, and economic shift that permanently alters the rules of this geopolitical chess match. But what's your take? Where do you think this strategy of asymmetric warfare will ultimately lead? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. Getting different perspectives on this is super important to us. And of course, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support is what allows us to keep breaking down the complex stuff. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next episode.